All right, so we're here with Boomer. Introduce you guys to the camera. Who are you?
My name is Trevor Hicks.
Okay.
My name's Tia Stevens.
Tia Stevens and Trevor Hicks. This is Boomer Bates and Michael Williams. So you asked Boomer to show you some land recently. How did that go, Trevor?
We actually ended up not going and looking at it because after the things Boomer told me, I figured it was just best to wait and try and buy a house instead of buy land and build a house.
Okay. And then, Boomer, what happened next?
Well, he got to talking to me about his girlfriend that had inherited some property in Benton, Tennessee, and they wanted to discuss that a little further.
Okay.
And so we set up another meeting and we met, and I was impressed by her knowledge of real estate without having any coaching.
Okay. So what you're saying is the client knew more than you did about real estate before you... I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Maybe.
So you saw some talent.
I did see some talent, and I gave bad advice about school, or depending on who you talk to. But I said, hey, you seem like you're pretty intelligent. You might want to come talk to Michael and see what he can tell you about real estate better than I can.
Okay, so Boomer said you should get your real estate license, right?
Basically, that's what he said.
Okay.
The words drop out right now and get your real estate license.
Drop out of what were you studying before?
Nursing. He said if you're not married to nursing, look into real estate.
Nice. Okay. So let's talk about it. What questions might you have about being a real estate agent, or what can we help you with?
Well, I didn't realize that schooling was only like 72 hours. I expected you to have to go to like college for a year to sell houses.
It is amazing how little school you need. So yeah, there's a 70 or 75-hour course that you have to take. You pass the class test, then you pass the state test, and boom, you can now help people make the largest financial purchase of their lives. So that's not scary at all.
No.
But no, it is a very low barrier to entry. And it's also why you see a ton of people that have their real estate license and also do something else. It's an easy way for what the culture calls today a side hustle. It's an easy thing to do while you have another job. And so there are a ton of part-time agents out there that kind of do it on the side and play around a little bit. And I say play around, I mean, obviously buying a house is not something you want to play around with, but you don't necessarily have to do it full time. So not to disagree with Boomer, but maybe instead of drop out, the right answer might be to do both. There's no harm in being a nurse and a real estate agent, that's for sure. All right, so low barrier to entry, then what other questions might you have?
Do you create your own hours or...
Okay. So what hours do you work?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Basically.
So if you're like Boomer, you work 3 hours a day. No, I'm kidding. No. So I tell people all the time, I was a part-time agent to start with too. I worked at Bradley Wellness Center as the marketing guy, and then I did real estate on the side. And so I tell people all the time that you typically work a 40-hour week in the W-2 regular corporate world. Well, if you want to trade that in and go into real estate, you have to work more hours. You typically work 60 or 70 hours. The good news is, though, you get to pick which 60 or 70 hours you want to work. So one of the great things about real estate and why a lot of people want to get into this industry is that they like the flexibility of it. They like being able to come and go as they please. If you're good at this job, or if you want to be good at this job, it requires a good bit of self-discipline because you don't have to be anywhere at any certain time. You're not a W-2 employee, you're a 1099 contractor. So if you work with somewhere like Keller Williams or Coldwell Banker or one of those companies, there's typically a little bit of a schedule and a little bit of a structure, but none of them require you to be here at a certain time. So it takes a little bit of self-starter in you to get going, a little bit of self-motivation. But then what a lot of people miss is they see the one house you show them or the 5 houses you show them, and then you show up at closing and you pick up a big check. And they're like, oh, well, that was easy. He worked 3 hours with us and made $5,000. So the real thing is, though, there's a lot of research that goes into it that you don't see while you're at work or school or wherever you are, and you're wanting to buy a house later. You want to go look at houses later. While you're working, he's also working to set the schedule up, to make sure he has all the information about the house. Then he actually goes and shows you the house after hours. So while you're working 9 to 5, he's probably working some of those hours for you that you didn't see. Then he shows you the house. Then you say, oh, you know what? I want to buy this house. Well, then at 9:30 that night, he's typing up the contract. He's calling the other agent. Is it still available? What special documents do we need? All those kinds of things. So then you saw an hour's worth of work and he put in 3, right? And so some people miss that. So
you kind of mentioned the taxes a little bit. I've had 2 jobs. They both give you a W-2. They take it out themselves. You don't have to worry about it. How does it work with real estate?
So that's a good question. This is probably a good point for me to say, consult your CPA. I am not a certified public accountant. I will tell you what my experience has been, and then you can draw conclusions from that if you like. I would say that the best strategy is for every $100 you make or you get in commission, $25 of that 100 needs to go in a separate account that you call your tax account. And so every $100, 75 you keep, 25 goes away. If you keep that consistently throughout your career, you will have enough money to pay your taxes and probably have a little bit left over. And so that would be good. But yeah, because it's not a W-2, they're not going to take taxes out of your check. So every time Boomer gets $100, he should be putting $25 away for every 100 that he gets. We just had this conversation this week, as a matter of fact. Yeah, Boomer was doing some math and said this is how much he needs to make his life easy and worth living. And I said, well, great. What about the taxes? Oh, yeah. So we basically increased it about 25% because that's roughly how much you're going to have to pay. There's a self-employment tax in the United States, and it's 15.3%. So the thing that makes up the self-employment tax is Social Security and Medicare for the employee and Social Security and Medicare for the employer. So when you put those together, you add it up and it's 15.3%. So that's the self-employment tax. Then you have the federal income tax. So you got to pay that. So withhold that from your check. Then you got to pay your state income tax if you live in the state of Georgia. So you got to withhold that from your check. By the time you add all that up, 25% is probably a good number. So that's the tax implication. What other questions do you have? Boomer, while she's thinking, what have you found as a fairly new agent that was the biggest surprise to you?
In the course, I was surprised about how much ethics was pushed during the 75-hour real estate course. And I thought, man, there's no way that people are this bad, and that they have to focus this much on ethics. And not all, but some are. I understand why people have trust issues and why I have to earn people's trust. I'm a trusting person.
I had a conversation today with a client that has bought 3 or 4 houses over his lifetime. So he's not a brand new person to real estate, but he was asking me, what if the square footage is wrong on the appraisal that comes back? Does that affect the value of my house? And I said, well, yes and no. The square footage being wrong is probably the wrong way to think about it, because there's 5 different ways you can measure a house. Are you measuring from the outside measurements or the inside measurements? Are you measuring do all of the closets count? Is there one that has a low ceiling? Because that may not count. Depending on how high the ceiling is, they may not count it. So we can have 2 people that measure a house the exact same way, and they'll read the tape differently. Like, it will literally change the square footage. So a lot of people tend to think the price per square foot matters. And it's a good metric to kind of understand what's going on in the market. And it's a really good metric for understanding trend lines. So if prices are selling or homes are selling for $100 a square foot in 2016, and they're selling for $120 in 2017, they're selling for $140 in 2018, then you see the trend line. So it's a good metric for measuring how much cost of housing is going up. But it's not that great of a measurement to say, this house is 3,100 square feet, and 2 doors down, this house is 2,900 square feet. Therefore, this house should be more than that house by this amount. Trevor, you've been pretty quiet. What questions do you have?
I think you've answered most of my questions, honestly.
Oh, okay. Well, good. What you got, Tia?
So how do you find the houses to sell?
Good question. Okay. So In a perfect world, it would be listed on the MLS. The MLS is the multiple listing service. So that is where all of the brokers in our area have agreed to work together in this database called the multiple listing service. So we put all of our listings in there, and we all agree to cooperate with the commission. So if we're getting 6% commission from a seller to sell the property, we have agreed already that we will share some of that commission with the other agent. Almost all agents share it half. So 3% to us, 3% to the other agent. Every now and then you'll find one that does 3.5% to themselves and 2.5% to the other side. So it happens, but that's typically not what we see. So in a perfect world, that's where you find all the houses. Now, in the last couple of years, the housing market's been super hot. There have been a lot less listings on the market that are officially listed. So we have to do things like knock on doors and say, hey, I have a client that wants to buy in this neighborhood. Would you be willing to sell? And if you would, how much do you want? So there have been times when we've done that like hardcore prospecting, which, most folks, when I say that, like, oh my gosh, I got to go knock on a stranger's door. Yeah, sometimes you do. That's part of it.
Trick or treat.
Boomer doesn't like that part of the job. Part of it is talking to people you do know, right? So you grew up in this town and you know a ton of people in this town. And so we were talking beforehand, Keith Robinette, calling Keith up and being like, hey, would you like to sell your house? That's a much easier call than calling somebody you don't know, right? So inevitably, we talk to people who are looking to buy houses, and then we know a lot of people that would sell their house that may not have it on the market yet. So a lot of times we will call them. Last year, there was one point in the MLS last year where there were only 74 houses listed. But that month, we sold 130. So that tells you if we sold 130 and there were only 74 available, there was a whole bunch of those situations where we just knew somebody was willing to sell. So we found that seller through our own database or through other means, just people we know. Sometimes you post on Facebook.
There's a lot of posts on Facebook last year. Hey, I need this house in this neighborhood. If you're willing to sell, let me know.
Yeah.
Everybody was
there was
doing
a ton of that, yeah. So working your social media channels. Again, that's who you know. So a lot of times it is who you know or who knows you. It's gotten to the point now with this podcast and several other things we do marketing-wise that people are like, oh, you're that real estate guy. I'm like, yes, I am. What's your name again? So it's starting to kind of catch some critical mass, but that is how we find them.
So do people come to you and say, like, I want 4-bedroom, 2-bath, this kind of house, and y'all's job is to find it for them?
Yes, okay. Exactly it. Now, what is really nice is when they come to us and they say, I want a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, and here's my pre-approval for $300,000.
Yeah, they're already approved.
That is really helpful that they already know that they have the money locked up and ready, right? It got to the point where we got so many of those asks, like, hey, will you help me find a house? Hey, will you help me find a house? And there were so many times that the people answered, or we would answer, yeah, we'd love to help you. Have you talked to a lender yet? And their answer was, no. What do you mean by lender? Like, the person that's going to give you the money, they're going to loan you the money. That's called a lender. So that happened so many times in 2016, 17, 18 that on our Facebook page now, if you click to message us, there's actually a response that is already typed out, like what's the first step to buying a home? And so if you click that, you get an automatic response from us. The best first step to buying a home is finding a lender. And then we talk about all the good things about how you want to find a lender. We use Hannah Rogers with Movement Mortgage a lot because she's really good at helping people get through that process of getting pre-approved. She's super responsive. Doesn't matter if it's 10 a.m. or 10 p.m., she's going to respond. So that's always nice, especially when people work for a living. They're typically doing this kind of thing from 5 to 10 p.m. instead of 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. They're usually busy during the day. So because she's so helpful and responsive, it's one of the reasons we use her. But we kind of go through those steps. Like, first step, find a good lender. That's more important than a good real estate agent in my mind. Then once you find a good lender, then you find a good real estate agent. Then when you meet with that real estate agent, you meet with them at the office so that they can kind of show you what's on the market. Because if you're trying to do that part on your own and you're trying to find the house on your own, there's a good chance that you'll get bad data, like we talked about earlier. You'll see a house that says it's for sale. It's really not. Or it is under contract and they just haven't updated it yet. Or it says it's for sale on Zillow because it's a pre-foreclosure where they got a notice 6 years ago that it was going into foreclosure and they caught their payments up, but Zillow never updated their system. So now you think it's for sale and it's really not. So there's a whole bunch of those times that you just kind of waste your time. So it's really you're much better off if you meet with an agent in the office first so they can show you what's on the market, set up all those appointments, and it's just a way to maximize your time. So you don't go driving around all over the county for homes that aren't for sale, you know. Yeah. What else you got? You got another one, Tia, while Boomer's thinking?
Okay, so when you meet the people at the house to sell the house, how long do you usually spend there, and like what's the process like?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to let you answer that one, Boomer.
Sometimes you don't get in the front door, and sometimes you're there an hour and a half.
Sometimes they're literally like, I don't want it.
Well, that was, I'm not going to name names, but we had 4 or 5 houses to look at one Saturday, and we looked at 2. We rolled up to the third one. The wife literally opened the front door and said, nope, and shut it and come back. I mean, it was just, it was amazing. I was just like, we're here. You don't even want to look at it. She said, I can't stand the smell.
Oh.
And I was like, oh.
Oh.
I was like, well, we can fix. Nope. I was like, all right, we'll just be early to the next appointment then. So, but that happens. And then it just depends on the buyers. Last year, my wife and I, before we started to build a house, we were looking. I mean, we could be in a house 7 minutes. Figure it out. Is this one good for us? No. Okay, next. But I'm in houses all the time. And then sometimes people just like to shop. They like to look and shop. And we've got a house that we're closing on Monday, and the sellers and I have been there 3 times since we've put it under contract.
I sold my brother-in-law a house in 2011 when I first got my license. I was an investor before that for about a decade, so I was new to the industry, but not new to the industry, you know. And so I sold him a house in 2011. In 2013, he was ready to buy again. So he's going to turn that other one into a rental and go buy his next one. And I promise you, we drove into at least 100 driveways. Now, we didn't show him all 100 houses, but we pulled into at least 100 driveways. There's no doubt. Anytime something would come up for sale in Murray County, he would be like, hey, let's go see it. Okay, let's go. We would literally pull in the driveway, and he'd be like, yeah, this ain't the one. So then we would pull that back out, go see another one. We'd probably knock out 7 or 8 a night. And so we'd pull in the next right. Nope, just back out, go again. So I will say that's gotten a little less of the case now because technology's gotten so much better. While it was just a decade ago, but in 2012, it was pretty common to see cell phone pictures in the listings. And so you couldn't really see the house all that well. It was also uncommon to have a video walkthrough. Today, video's everywhere. So, yeah, we all have these fantastic camcorders in our pockets. But back then, we just didn't have videos. And the videos were so large. Like you'd try to take a video and you just couldn't upload it. Like you'd have to wait till you got to Wi-Fi. And then when you got to Wi-Fi, this huge file, and none of our computers could hold the size of the data that we had back then. So it was very uncommon. Today, it's weird if you don't just do a video walkthrough. You know, you should do a video walkthrough. You should actually have a professional take real pictures. Like that's what you should do today. So now it's just much easier. You don't have to go see 100 houses to figure it out. All right. So before we wrap it up, any other thoughts, questions, concerns you got?
I have one more question.
Oh, let's hear it.
So when you get real estate license, how long does it normally take for an agent to just become successful? Like they get on a team, to actually be able to make it? Like, is it a year, 2 years?
Well, that's a good question. So let's define solo agent versus team. So as you get your license, there's a couple things you need to do. As a real estate agent, you can't just work on your own the first couple of years. You actually have to work for somebody else. So you got to go to work for a broker. Which one of those are you going to work for? There's Keller, Coldwell Banker, Remax. There's a dozen brokerages in this town. So I would say you should interview with them. All of them if you want. I interviewed with all of them. And so I wanted to make sure I made the right choice because I didn't want to bounce around a lot. So I originally worked for another company, and it was a great fit for me for the first 8 years of my career. Along the way, I found Keller Williams, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why I think that would be your brokerage, but we'll save that for another podcast. But anyway, so that's the next decision you have to make. Who am I going to work for? Which company best represents what I want and who I am? So once you make that decision, then you got to figure out, do I want to be a solo agent or do I want to be on a team? And you can be successful both ways. There are plenty of people that are successful as solo and plenty that are successful as a team. Being on a team, you're not responsible for all that other work. So some people have said in the past, well, I don't want to be on a team because they take half my money. But what's really happening is if you're on a team, you're taking half my money, right? Like I'm not going to show that house, and I'm willing to give you the money to do that because at 4:00 I want to go home. So I'm willing to give you half my money. So when you think about that, it's a different perspective. You're like, oh, wait a minute, I get it now, right? So there's that. There's a commission split that I get if you're on my team and that you get if you're on my team. We split the commission even further than we talked about earlier with the broker getting a split as well. The other side is the solo agent. So if you are totally good with doing your own paperwork and doing your own marketing and getting your own leads because you're well connected in the community or whatever it might be, if you're good at all those things, then yeah, you can be a solo agent and be successful. To me, the downside of that is if you want to go on vacation, well, you better take your phone and your laptop with you because you're going to be working. Because while you may be on vacation, the client that you're working on is not on vacation. They're actually back here and they're trying to find a house. And so you've got to be ready to handle that, right? The other thing is at 9:30 at night when you're laying in bed watching TV and somebody texts you about a house, you got to be ready to answer the phone, right? Because if you're not on a team like ours, if you say, I'm going to take off Thursday and Friday, like Corey on our team from time to time says, hey, I'm going to take Friday off. And so we just don't direct the phones to him. We send it to Boomer and Drew and they handle it for him. If it's one of Corey's clients that needs something, you've got a whole team of people here to help you. So there's really no downtime if you're a solo agent, right? So being a solo agent, you're always on, which is fine. You're 20 years old, whatever. That's easier to do when you're 20 than you're 45. Yeah, I can't handle it at this age. But anyway, so defining solo agent versus team is the first part of your answer. The second part of your answer is some people do it right away. Some people are successful right out of the gate. Some people, it takes a couple years to get going. To me, it seems easier to be successful on a team because you have such support around you. If you're new to this industry, new to how sales works in general, new to how real estate works in general, it's really hard to be someone's trusted advisor when you just aren't really sure what you're doing yet, Mm-hmm. It's much easier to join a team where Boomer's been doing it for 4 years, Corey's been doing it for 5, Drew's been doing it for 10. I've been in the industry for 20. I was a mortgage broker before. I was an investor before. So being able to tap into that knowledge, when you call your aunt, you're like, hey, would you list your house with me? And your aunt goes, well, I would, Tia, but I really don't know how much you know about real estate. You can be like, yeah, but I worked with a team that sold 188 houses last year. They probably know what they're doing. I can lean on them for their experience. Now your aunt's all of a sudden like, yeah, I'll help you out. Sure. Right. Because she can trust you now because you're working with one of the most trusted teams in real estate. So that's what I say. You can be successful right away. All right. Well, any other questions?
No, sir.
Mm-mm.
No? Awesome. Well, thank you guys for coming in today. I really appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much. I hope that was
Thank
informative.
you.
Boomer, thanks for talking them out of being a nurse and talking them into real estate. Oh, let's go get it. Yeah, the people at Hamilton Medical Center are now mad at you.
Yeah.
All right. That's it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.